Okay, do I stand or do I can stand? Stand up? I sit down? I think I'm going to consider CSUN journalism school for my daughter because very lively professor, very interesting, and I would consider it. 20 years ago, I didn't wear glasses. I was a very young reporter, my second year in the field. And Radio Korea was 3 years old, opened up a radio station in LA, all Korean language. Before the riots, Koreans enjoyed new music from Korea, fresh news coming out from Korea instantly. So radio was one of their, part of their life. On April 29th, 1992, Korean Americans were also anticipating the outcome of Rodney King verdict, but nobody had clue of what will happen next. In the afternoon of 29th, when the truck driver Reginald Denny was beaten, we've been getting calls from our listeners. What's going on there? We quickly announced people to get out there as soon as they can. If they're still there, close the stores and get out. And moments later, another influx of calls were coming in. Now the callers are saying, my store is burning. And it was just not one or two calls, but calls were coming from all different directions. We normally screen our calls for our callers, but the impact and magnitude of the event was very serious. So we decided to open up the phone lines and go live. And it was wild, beyond your imagination, you know, fires, you know, looting. So we opened up the airwaves. People didn't get police response or fire department's responses. And they were turning to our radio station to call police for them and fire department, but we couldn't reach our police or our fire at the time, fire department at the time. So the management decided, hey, let's just open up. And we began to air live. One of the examples you heard on the audio is one of the reporter who was on live with one of the merchants in South Central. And by night, we had some information about what was really happening in the area. So we directed, the reporter was actually telling that her store was next to the building that was burning and is in imminent danger of burning too. And the store owner didn't have any insurance. She was telling the reporter what she should do. that was the example of all the victims calling to our station. Professor Kim told me this event last year. I should have prepared this event, but like all reporters do, at the last minute, I was corresponding with Dr. Kim since early morning last night. So I wrote down last night some of the things, because I can go on and on and on regarding the riot. So I have some notes. So, like I said earlier, normally we screen phone calls, but the information was too much for us to handle. That was one of the reasons. And the urgency is that, we didn't have time to confirm this incident and to write the stories. That's why we just let the situation just directly to the public. Regarding the radio information, we covered stories on police brutalities and race issues and all that, but we especially focused on the business damages, because there were about 2,300 businesses, specifically Korean businesses, that were burned or looted, and amount of the damage was estimated like $350 to $400 million. That's why it was very important for Koreatown's economy and as a whole Los Angeles economy. First full month, our radio station did not air commercials. That's because we felt that many businesses were lost, and we thought that it wasn't the right thing to just for us to run commercials while we were doing the emergency broadcasting. I think we did something that a small local radio station can handle. After we covered the story, a few days later, like next day, victims were coming into our station for help. So we opened up a food drive, the Victim Assistance Center. We did a donation drive for victims. And we also worked closely with FEMA to have the victims to rebuild businesses. So our report was, first stage was the occurrence of the incident. We also operated the victims count. So most of the information that were coming regarding to business damages were coming from Radio Korea. We gave up our offices to volunteers who were taking counts and phone calls. So, myself and my fellow reporters gave up our desk phones. Of course, we didn't have time to sit down at the time. All we had is, I see an old recorder here. I had the same old Marantz cassette tape recorder with a first generation Motorola cell phone that looks like a military walkie-talkie. It was a pretty cool thing back then. That was only the tools that we had. That's how we worked. And as a young, hungry reporter, second-year reporter was very hungry back then. Not like today. We didn't get paid because our finance department was shut down because of office space is all occupied by volunteers. I lived off credit card and free meals from donation. Koreatown restaurant owners were very generous. They were providing us 3 times a day a hot meal. So I survived a month in that situation. Could not go home. We had limited resources, manpower, but we had to be on air 24 hours. Some people volunteered massage volunteering. We've been working 12 hours, 13, even 16 hours a day, covering the situation. They came in and massaged our backs. The community was helping out what they could. We opened up a victims assistance center right behind our station. There was the Korean church. I begged the elders over there, and we'll use only a couple of days, but the victims occupied the church several months. I feel really sorry for them, but I was very thankful for them, for us to use that facility. So Radio Korea acted as a kind of a command post during the riots, a source of information that was coming from the field. Also, community leaders gathered in the station, and the direction came from the leaders of the community, and we aired that direction to our listeners, especially the affected victims. So it was kind of a community center. And then after a few days, we had a community town hall meeting. President George H. Bush came down to our station and gave a message to our community. And then we started another campaign to rebuild the community. And then we turned our direction to have a better relation with neighborhood community, African American community, and Latino community, especially African American community and Korean American communities. Try to have a lot of dialogue and understandings. This event was a very tragic event for Korean American people, but also all the people who lived in that era in LA. I think everybody was hurt. But one thing that we learned is that because of the tragic situation, we got to know each other a little bit better. 20 years later now is much better than 20 years ago. And I feel optimistic. The video we saw earlier, the Korean store owner couldn't communicate. But now, 20 years later, their sons and daughters and the next generation, they don't have any language barrier or cultural barriers. So I feel very optimistic in the future, but we still have a lot of understandings that we have to come up with. And I leave other panels to share the valuable stories. So I will stop here. Thank you.
By the way, Radio Korea provided some rice cakes, a Korean refreshment. So it's over there. I have some plates and water too. So make sure you get some. Oh, okay.